All right, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's presentation, Preparing for Off-Season, Tips and Tricks for Fluids in Your Motorcycles, Classics, Hot Rods, Muscle Cars, and Race Cars. My name is Greg Jones, and I'm the Content Director for the Power and Performance Group here at Babcock's Media. And I'm going to be the moderator for today's webinar, sponsored by D-A Lubricants. Guys, as the seasons change and winter approaches, it's time to think about preparing your beloved motorcycles, classic cars, hot rods, muscle cars, and race vehicles for off-season hibernation. During today's webinar, we will delve into essential maintenance practices to ensure your prized machines remain in top condition during the cold months. Now, before we introduce our other speakers and get started, I'd like to address a few housekeeping items. As part of this webinar, we will have a live Q&A session, and we will address some questions during the last portion of the event. Now, to improve the chances of your question being answered, please don't wait until the very end of the event to submit them. Please ask those questions as you think of them. And to be able to submit questions, simply type them into the Ask a Question box and click the Submit button. Additionally, this webinar is being recorded and it will be available on demand for you to view. We encourage you to direct anyone who will benefit from this information to view the recorded presentation. And tomorrow you'll receive an email with a link to the recording, and it will also be posted on the Engine Builder, Motorcycle and Power Sports News, and tomorrow's Technician websites. To help you view this webinar, how you please, the webinar software has the ability to open, close, and resize different elements on your screen. To make the window larger or smaller, grab a corner of the window and just drag it. You can also make some windows full screen by clicking the Maximize button in the upper right corner of that window. If any of you would like to receive a certificate of attendance, click on the graduation hat icon within the black toolbar on the left side of your computer screen. In that same toolbar, you'll also find icons to share the webinar by email or on social media. And if you're viewing from a mobile device, you may have to click on the 4 dots menu in the upper right corner of your screen to view those different icons. Now, as always, your feedback helps make our events better, so please click the survey icon to leave your comments about today's topic and presenters. The survey will also appear in the middle of your screen towards the end of the event. If you need help at any point during the webinar, send us a message through the Ask a Question box. And finally, if the slides stop advancing or if you're having any problems with audio, try pressing the F5 key at the top of your keyboard, or Command R if you're on a Mac. This will refresh the webinar console on your screen. Okay, now that we got the housekeeping items out of the way, I'd like to introduce our presenters. We are happy to have Jim Salmon joining us today. Jim is a technical manager for D-A Lubricant Company. He provides sales staff and customer support, lubricant recommendations, product education, parts analysis, troubleshooting, and product cross-referencing. Jim is certified in truck engine analysis and is also a certified Caterpillar engine instructor. He's been with DA for nearly 10 years. We also have Nick Dixon joining us today. Nick is a territory business sales manager for DA Lubricant Company. With more than 40 years in the oil industry, Nick is a consultant for Penn Grade 1 and works with both DA distributors and end users. Now let's get our presentation started. Nick and Jim, thanks for joining us and lending us your expertise. We have a number of questions here that we're going to be going through. And again, to reiterate for our viewers today, please make sure you guys are submitting questions as you guys see those. All right, so guys, let's get started. You know, obviously, we're sitting here end of October, heading into November and those cold winter months for much of the country. And a common question for folks with these classic cars and motorcycles and race vehicles is, you know, how to properly store those vehicles over those months. So, you know, let's kick it off with this question here. should people be changing oil when storing a car or motorcycle for winter?
Nick, you want to take this one?
Sure.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everybody. Want to thank everybody for tuning into this great webinar we're having. And that question that Greg just asked, should I change my oil when I'm storing my car, motorcycle, hot rod, classic car before winter? And the answer is absolutely yes, you should. People don't realize that, you've run your vehicle all summer long out there on the roads and enjoying the nice weather and everything and getting ready to put it away. Well, a lot of folks just put it in the garage, throw the cover on it and walk away. Well, that's not a good practice. And the reason being is, as you're driving that car all summer long, you're gathering what we would call the combustion byproducts of an internal engine. And that means the soot and dirt and fuel dilution and everything is going into that crankcase. So when you put the car away or your bike or whatever piece of equipment you have, and if you let that oil sit all winter long in that crankcase, plus with the moisture that you're going to have, you have an opportunity to start rust, corrosion, and that's not a very good practice. So we've always recommended when you getting ready to put that car or vehicle away for the winter, when you're done with that last drive or that last outing, bring it in. That's the time you want to change your oil and a new filter. Now that way, once you've done that and you've accomplished that, start that engine back up for maybe 3, 4, 5 minutes, then shut it down. Now what you've done is you've put a fresh coat of oil over all the internal bearings and components of your engine. So that is going to prevent the rust oxidation from occurring while it's sitting there. And then when you're ready to go out next spring, you're all set. You can turn the key on and away you go. So it is a good practice and we recommend it. Change that oil before you put any piece of equipment away in the for the winter storage.
That's good, Nick. Just to follow up a little bit with what Nick said, I get asked the question all the time. It's like, well, if I put fresh oil in it and I start it up and I coat everything and it sits all winter, won't that oil kind of drain off of those components at the top end and be all settled in the bottom? Well, it depends on the oil you're using. If you're using Pin Grade 1, this stuff has just tenacious clingability. It's going to coat those parts, like Nick said, start it up for 3 to 5 minutes, let it run, coat everything up, shut it off, leave it alone. I have guys that are I talk to all the time that they go out once a month, start the car up or whatever, and let it run for a while and shut it off. There's no need to do that. Let it sit. That oil will be there on those top components if you're using the right oil when you start it up in the spring or at the start of the new season. So don't hesitate to do that.
Yeah. Now, guys, Nick mentioned a few of the things that could happen if someone didn't change the oil or neglected to. But you want to elaborate on, what could happen to the engine or to the car or the vehicle in general, if that oil is left for the winter season or for too long of a time. What are some of those things that could really harm what's going on?
Well, Nick kind of touched on that a little bit. I think he mentioned it. One of the things about the Pin Grade 1 oil is it will eventually separate. If there's fuel in there, it will separate. If there's moisture in there, it will eventually separate. Because we all know oil and water don't mix. Now, during operation, the stuff stays suspended and it's great. It doesn't affect the performance of that product whatsoever. However, after it sets for a while, you can separate. And when it does separate, you could have oil and water separation, and you could have moisture that actually is coming in contact with some of those metal components, those polished metal components, and start to cause some oxidation wear. So that's one of the same with fuel.
Yeah, very good. Now, I was also curious. Well, Nick, let me know if you had anything to add there, but if not, I can jump to the next question.
Yeah, that was a good point. What Jim said too. And we have to remember sometimes in the older engines and things, we're going to get some fuel blow by. It just, the engines are old, the clearances have opened up. And we've noticed over the years with the introduction of what I would call the ethanol in our gasoline. And people don't realize, ethanol is alcohol. And that type of byproduct into that crankcase, if you leave that sit like that, it's going to want to draw moisture. Alcohol will draw moisture. And we've seen that happen. So it's not a good idea to leave that sitting in there, because with the alcohol and the moisture, you could actually start to see things grow in the oil. And it's not a good thing. And especially I've noticed with a lot of our racers that are using E85, Greg, out there, they get a tremendous amount of blow by. And that E85 sitting in a crankcase all winter long, that is just it's a growth bed. I mean, you will see things start to develop in that crankcase just with that. You're giving food to the bacteria that's in there. It's going to start to grow. So it is a good practice to make sure drain everything out of that crankcase, change that filter, because of those byproducts of combustion will start to corrode, grow, and cause damage.
Yeah. Now, guys, I had a question here. You see people commonly, empty fluids out of something like a lawnmower or maybe the snowblower after seasons. Is there a scenario where you store a vehicle without fluid, in the engine, or is that a bad practice as well?
I personally don't recommend it. We recommend just like we've been saying, start it up with fresh oil, coat everything, give it a protective layer, and then let it set. I don't care if it's a snowplow going away for the summer or a lawnmower going away for the winter, or like we're talking about here, high performance vehicles, cars, motorcycles, race cars, things like that, boats, whatever. Still a good idea to have oil in there to help just kind of protect those parts and give you a barrier.
Yeah. Okay. And then, are there any differences when you're talking about something like a motorcycle or, a classic car versus a race vehicle, or is the practice, pretty much universal?
Universal. Yeah. Same practice.
Yep. All right. Very good. And then lastly, before we move on, we've had people ask about break-in oil and, how long they can safely keep break-in oil in their engine. Is there a certain amount of time that should sit in there?
Yeah, Greg, we've always, first of all, on the break-in oil, we'll defer to the engine builder that did the engine, because the engine builder has the technology, the knowledge of that engine he's putting together. Now, if an individual is doing that, our recommendation is, if you're going to be driving that vehicle after you've rebuilt it, we suggest at least 150 to 250 miles of road driven with that engine with our break-in oil. What that does is gives the engine a chance for the cylinder ring wall seat to get them rings seated into the cylinder wall, plus get your cam run in. Mm-hmm. And also, we got to remember, the first probably 20 minutes of any brand new engine is going to be the most violent time that engine ever sees, because you are literally wearing components. And that's the principle of the break-in oil with the correct formulation, is to get all those parts matched and run in together. So again, we recommend anywhere from 150 to 250 road driven miles. Everything looks good. Bring it back in, change the break-in oil, change the filter, and put your Penn Grade 1 or your chosen running oil back into that engine. Now, engine builders we've talked to over the years that are doing dyno work, they typically like to run that engine 30 minutes to 45 minutes on the break-in oil, because they can see everything that's going on. They know what the compression is going to be, the leak down tests and stuff. And typically 30 to 45 minutes on a dyno accomplishes the same thing.
Yeah, the engine builders have an advantage over the everyday driver, where they can actually perform those tests and say, should I run a little longer, or am I done breaking in? Like Nick was referring to, the leak down test. Are those rings seated? Is there no more blow by? Is there no more smoke coming out of that? Is everything seated? Is it even across the cylinders? the average guy like you and me, we don't have access to that. So we're just going to have to go out and drive it for a couple hundred miles, different speeds, different RPMs, nothing steady. Just keep it going until we feel pretty confident, and then get that oil out of there and put something in like that Penn Grade 1 partial synthetic multi-bis, something like that to help protect that engine for the rest of the time.
Yeah. Nope, that's some great advice. Thank you, guys. Now, obviously, when you're storing a vehicle, it's not just the engine that has oil in it. There's obviously other areas of the vehicle that are going to have that oil potentially sitting there. So, what about the rear end and differential fluid? How do you guys recommend people treat that for a winter storage?
You want me to take this, Nick?
Sure, Jim, go ahead, please.
Okay. A differential, like, it is very, very much one of the overlooked components on any vehicle. Typically, your gear oils are going to be a little bit more durable. They're not seeing. Don't get me wrong. It's still a very hostile work environment that oil's exposed to, but they're not exposed to like the combustion process, like engine oils are, where there's a lot of contaminants, a lot of things being thrown at it from different directions. So as long as it's sealed, vented, of course, but properly sealed, it should be okay. There's a drain interval, a recommended interval. I would go by your OEM, or as we do with the engines, a rebuilder. If you have somebody who does your machine work or differential works on the components, then whatever their recommendation drain interval is. But the trick is obviously make sure it's not milky, make sure there's no moisture in it. If you see a seal that's leaking, get that seal replaced and check that fluid and then add new fluid to it. Because if you see a seal leaking out, I guarantee you it's leaking in. That thing breathes and contaminants will be sucked back in with it, especially moisture. So, I mean, it's down at the bottom of the car. It sees all the road debris and splashing coming off of it. So just check it. I wouldn't say you have to drain your rear end, but if it's time for a drain it seasonally is what I mean. But I would check it, make sure it's full, keep everything clean, and change it when it's recommended, not necessarily every season.
Okay.
And just go along with what Jim said, Greg. Most of the older classic hot rod cars, as we all know, it's not basically that hard to check that fluid. You have your two plugs, you got a drain plug and you got your fill plug. And the rule of thumb is you pop that top fill plug open, take your little finger, stick it in there. If you feel oil, that's telling you, hey, I got good oil in it. Now, if you pull that, like Jim said, you pull your finger out and it doesn't look like gear oil anymore. It looks more like a milkshake on it. Yeah, then it's time to take that bottom plug and open it up, drain that out, and go ahead and change your differential fluid. But Jim, and you're both right. It's one of the most underlooked fluids we do. People just don't do it. The only time they do it is when they have a problem. So, like I said, it only takes a minute. You're under there anyways. Go ahead and just check that top plug, see if there's oil in it, and see what condition it is. And if you're not sure, refer to your OEM handbook. It'll tell you.
Yeah. And guys, on that note, again, when it comes to storage of vehicles and making sure everything's, good and ready to go once, that vehicle is going to come back out, is there anything else people should be making sure to check when it comes to fluids and that storage period?
Just overall looking, the main thing we refer to is the engine. That's the big thing. All fluid should be full, should be clean before you put it away. But again, those components, power steering, they're not seeing the violence that a combustion engine sees, and the different contaminants from air, from nitrogen in the air causing nitric acid, from sulfur in diesel fuel causing some sulfuric acid to form, and then moisture. So on just regular contaminants that are seeing all of those components that are getting past the rings into the combustion process. So the other ones, just make sure the fluid's clean and changed at regular intervals. That would be all I would say.
Yep. Very good. All right, guys. Well, again, sticking with the engine and with oil, let's talk a little bit more about Penn Grade 1, high performance oil specifically. Obviously you guys probably get asked a lot about viscosity and, what is right for people to run in various applications. So let's talk a little bit about that. viscosity of Penn Grade 1 high performance oil should folks be looking to put in their vehicles?
Well, the first thing, Greg, we always tell anybody that asks us that question is, one, if you have an owner's manual, open it up under the oil category and see what your OEM requires or recommends, what viscosity and what type of oil to use in that your vehicle. That's the first guideline. They're going to tell you what viscosity they want to see in there and under what conditions. Well, second, I had somebody build my engine for me. Good. Go back to your engine builder. He's the one that built the engine for you. He'll be able to provide what viscosity of oil you should be running in that engine. Well, if you did this engine yourself and you wanted to run a certain viscosity oil, another criteria we always try to ask people is, what is going to be your ambivalent temperature that you're going to be running in? You know, if you're going to be in the southern states, Texas, New Mexico, California, where it's over 100 degrees all the time, that would have an influence on, I would probably lean to a little bit heavier viscosity in those types of situations. So the three main criteria, again, your owner manual, your engine builder, and your ambivalent environment that you'll be running that car in helps determine what viscosity of oil that you'll be running.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And Jim's a great resource too. If somebody says, hey, I don't have any of that information, but I know what year my vehicle is and I know the engine size, our tech department can recommend to you what viscosity oil that vehicle probably rolled off the line with. So we can help you on that side too.
Excellent. Jim, anything to add there, or did Nick pretty well cover that?
As usual, he's thorough.
So, guys, I did want to ask, a question about clearances, because clearances play a role in viscosity, and obviously clearances have changed over the years. Obviously, when you're looking at stuff like a hot rod or a muscle car that's likely older versus today's newer race vehicles, those clearances are quite different. Do you want to just talk a little bit about what some of those differences might be and how that would change the type of viscosity you might run?
Sure. It's just like Nick was saying, the OEMs will tell you what that rolled off the showroom with or rolled out of the factory with and what they recommend based on that. Now, as things wear, that can change a little bit. One of the things that we talk about is oil analysis. I'm not going to, I could preach all day on that, but I'm not going to. It's not part of this segment. But that's really after the warranty period is up, looking at making a change or something like that where the OEM doesn't play a major role in that, then that's something we can probably help you with. If there's, you had a rebuild, you put undersized bearings and oversized bearings in it, things like that, we can make an adjustment. But one of the things that
Did we lose Jim's audio there?
I believe we did.
All right.
Well, to go along
Nick,
with Jim,
pick up?
yeah, the clearances have changed, Greg, as you know. They've gone from they've shrunk. They've gotten tighter and tighter to help performance. Well, the days of, let's say, the 20W50, when you had your larger bearing clearances, they've shrunk down now to maybe a 1030 or a 530 engine oil. And again, that's just due to those tighter clearances looking for better performance. And again, like Jim said, we can always go back to the OEM and check with us. But you're absolutely right. With the skinnier clearances comes the viscosity is going lower and lower. And we see that today on brand new cars coming off the line with a 0.16 in it. Think of that, a 0W16. How much lower can we go? But again, you want to be aware of that, and as Jim said, as that engine gets older, the clearances do open up, so a lot of people will maybe bump up a viscosity to accommodate that excess clearance. So that's critical.
Yeah. Very good. All right. Well, while we give Jim a second to get back on here, I just want to remind our viewers today, if you guys do have questions, make sure you guys are putting that in that question box. I do see a number of questions in there already, so thank you. We will get to those here in a little bit. But Nick, moving on, obviously having oil in the valve train of your engine is paramount in making sure that, those valve train components stay lubricated. So question here about the protection on camshafts, and specifically flat tappet or roller cams. How does Pengrade 1, protect those various camshafts?
That's a good question, Greg. Yeah. As we all know, going back into the earlier days of the production of our combustible engines, we all have, and a lot of us still do, a flat tappet cam. And that flat tappet cam back in those days needed the oil to provide a protection, what I always call a sacrificial coating. And that sacrificial coating we refer to in our terminology is our ZDDP. That is our zinc phosphorus package. And what that does, that adheres to that metal components up there, to that the lobes and the lifters. And every time that revolves, part of that protective layer is wiped off. The oil is actually being wiped off the zinc and phosphorus to protect the metal. So it is critical to have an oil that has the proper amount of zinc and phosphorus in it to provide that protection. And of course, the Pengrade 1 has that enhanced zinc phosphorus package in it, where a typical 1,500 parts per million zinc and 1,400 parts per million phosphorus. So that ensures that you're going to get that protection. And speaking of the roller cam, a couple of years ago, while I was attending one of the trade shows, a couple of the camshaft manufacturers came up to me. We were discussing this issue. And what the engine builders and the cam guys were starting to see also is some premature wear in the roller bearings, the needles in the roller bearings. And one cam guy told me, he said, well, it was obvious. You fix the weakest link with the flat tappet, the next link in our chain is a roller bearing. So again, with the Pengrade 1 high phosphorus, high zinc, we're able to offer that protection to not only the flat tappet, but to the roller cam operations.
Yeah, that's excellent. And like I said, very crucial to having a properly running engine and one that has a good valve train.
I'm back, Greg, on the phone.
Excellent. Well, Jim, welcome back.
Yeah, I don't know what happened.
Anything? I don't know if you heard what Nick said. I don't know if you had anything to weigh in on the camshaft question.
No, I just heard the very tail end of it, but I'm sure he covered everything completely.
All right. Well, we will move on. We got a question here about oil additives and whether people should be adding additives into their Pengrade 1 high performance oil.
Can I take that one?
Go for
Absolutely,
it.
Jim, go.
All right, this is one of my favorite subjects. The answer is absolutely not. There's a lot of oil additives out there that supposedly do this, they'll do that. But here's my philosophy, here's DA's philosophy, and here's Pengrade 1's philosophy on additives. If you have to put something extra in your oil to make it perform, you're buying the wrong oil to start with. All right. You wouldn't go to grandma's recipe for her apple pie, and if it calls for a quarter cup of salt, put 4 quarts of something in it. You wouldn't do it. It changes the recipe. It changes the formulation. Something negative will happen somewhere down the line. You might improve one aspect of it, but something else will be diminished. So no, we do not endorse any type of oil additives in our product. It has all the zinc and phosphorus it needs in there to protect that engine. It's got all the anti-wear. It's got the detergency and dispersancy to clean and protect and carry that away to your filter. And anti-foam, it's got it all. It's got everything it needs. Don't mess with the formula. How's that?
Hey, you said it with authority. So Nick, anything else to add there on Jim's comments?
Yeah, just one quick thing. It reminds me, we had a gentleman years ago call us and said that he was upset with our break-in oil. And I go, why? He goes, my ring blow-by is terrible. He said, it just smokes and everything. I said, well, what did you do? And he said, well, I got the Penn Grade 1 break-in oil, put it in the engine. Then I added 3 bottles of zinc additive to it. I go, whoa, what did you do? He goes, well, I was on the internet and it said I should add zinc additive to it when I'm breaking my engine in. So I said, no, unfortunately, as we all figured out later, what happened is he actually glazed his rings over. He had so much anti-wear in there that he couldn't get the seating process to work. So we told him again, no, the internet might be a good source for a lot of education, but as far as, like Jim said, adding anything to our Penn Grade 1 line of products, no, you do not need to do that. I mean, it's all there. It's formulated to all those components to work together. And if you put something else in there, like Jim said, you put extra salt in the recipe for it, might have a bad effect. The same thing happens to engine oil. You may affect one part of the formulation by putting this additive in there and it won't perform right. So it's a finely balanced product with years and years of testing we've done. You have everything in there you need that'll satisfy what you're trying to do.
And what, Nick, one of the other things, just quickly add on there, 2 of the things that we don't believe in currently with today's formulations, we don't like to see in a break-in oil, I'm strictly talking about break-in oil now, we do not like to see a high additive rate, in other words, excessive amounts of zinc or phosphorus, and we don't want to see a synthetic-based product being used as a break-in. Simple reason is we want controlled wear to take place during that break-in period. And if you're putting synthetic and high zinc additives in there, you're not allowing that wear to take place. You're protecting your engine, which is great. And that's what we're going to do after break-in with our synthetic blend, multi-viscosity Penn Grade 1 products. So that once it's broke in, then we're going to add the zinc product in there, not the zinc additive, the high zinc formulated oil, protect that engine.
Yeah, and I'm sure, Nick, in the example you gave, that guy probably had to tear back down his engine and replace rings and probably more, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, he had to take it apart. And like you said, the rings, he had to do a light honing on the cylinder walls too to ensure the next set of rings he would get a good seat. And he did call us back and follow up. He said, by golly, you were right. I go, why? He goes, use the break-in oil the way you said we should. I have no problems, great compression. And again, we thanked him and he said, no, thank you guys.
Yeah, excellent.
Unfortunately.
All right. We got another question here again pertaining to the oil specifically and detergent. Does Penn Grade 1 high performance oil contain detergent?
Yes. That's a simple answer. Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Yep. It does clean. It has dispersant and detergent in it, and it's got plenty of it in there to take care of it, as well as plenty of anti-wear. So it's got everything you need, carefully formulated. I'm not going to go into numbers because that's proprietary, but there's plenty in there to do the job. It has for years.
Yeah. And do you guys want to just elaborate on what those detergents, help with in terms of engine protection?
Well, detergent, just like they say shampoo does, but if you noticed my hair earlier, I'm not sure about shampoo. And Nick, you're catching me, so I don't want to hear it. But yeah, a detergent will clean the engine, any kind of deposits or whatever that come onto the engine that's exposed to the oil. The oil will basically work like shampoo and get a hold of that and suspend that debris or that contaminant and take it off, which in its dispersant property, which dispersant means takes it away, to the filter where it's either filtered out if it's big enough, and if it's small enough, it stays suspended in the oil. The nice thing about our products here at DA, including our Penn Grade 1 product, is the ability to keep the contaminants from agglomerating or getting too big. A lot of times people will change the oil after a while and they say, that oil looked pretty dirty. And when they tell me that, I went, okay, thanks. It's got detergent in it. It cleans. If it discolors, that means it was cleaning quite a bit. So maybe that may mean you have excessive contaminants or whatever. But the dispersant will take it away to the filter. And if it's big, the filter will take it out. If it's small, it'll keep it suspended. Small elements suspended will not cause any type of abrasive wear if they're small enough. So that's another way we blend our products, all of our engine oil products. So it's not a problem. So that's how dispersant and detergent works.
Very good. Nick, anything to add there? It sounded
No,
like
Jim said it all. We have a very good package in there to protect the engine and its components.
Yeah. All right. Now, moving to more of a race-specific application, should those folks be using a high-performance oil in their race car engine?
Yes, Greg. Completely different territory here. A race car engine today, the horsepower are getting tremendously high. The valve spring pressures are high. Clearances are tight. They're looking to maximize the performance out of that engine. And you remember when you have a high performance engine in a race car, you're running under load all the time. I mean, you know, whether you're drag racing or dirt tracking or asphalt racing, your engine all the time is under high stress, high shear. It's working twice as hard or 3 times harder than our typical passenger car that we're taking the family cruise on to go out to the ice cream stand.
Yeah,
So
sure.
you need an oil that's going to perform under those highly stressed situations. And that's one of the great things about Pen Grade 1. This oil is also geared to the race car engine. I mean, it's got all, like Jim said, it's got everything in there you're going to need. And with our years of experience, 50 plus, we've proven the performance of this oil in the racing applications. So yes, I would be leaning to looking for a good high performance oil in my race engine.
And just as a public service announcement here, when we're talking about our Pen Grade 1 product, that's primarily what we're talking about. Is high performance, nostalgic cars, vintage cars, classics, monster trucks, racing, anything other than what you drive on a daily basis back and forth to work. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because we do have another line of products called our Pen Grade, not to be confused with Pen Grade 1. Now, I get people all the time saying, I heard that you took the zinc out of your Pen Grade products. Well, no, there's zinc in our Pen Grade, but there's a whole lot of zinc in our Pen Grade 1. You're talking about 2 different products. Pen Grade 1, because of the amount of phosphorus and zinc in there, is not really recommended for today's over-the-road vehicles, just because of the catalytic converter and some problems the phosphorus can have with catalytic poisoning. So, yeah, we are primarily talking about high performance when we talk about our Pen Grade 1.
Yeah. No, I appreciate the clarification there, and I'm sure a lot of folks, can benefit from knowing the difference there. So, I also wanted to ask about fuel type. We touched on it a little bit earlier in a different question, but specifically with racing, guys can be using various different fuels. How does the fuel type have an impact on the oil in a racing application?
I'll let Jim handle that one. I know just enough to be dangerous about these new racing fuels they have out there. I'm sure Jim has a better handle on it than I do.
Thanks. No, it's fine. Yeah, he's right. I mean, there's methanol, there's alcohol, nitromethane, add gas. I've heard it all, the people that are running in there. The fact of the matter is, like Nick was saying, on the high performance, the amount of air and stuff they're pushing in these engines is causing contaminants in the fuel or the fuel itself to get into the oil. So that's another reason. I get asked all the time by people, I mean, passenger car is easy. How often should I change my oil in my passenger car? What's your manual say? It says every 5,000, every 8,000. Okay, then my answer is every 5,000, every 8,000. Our oil will be fine. When you get into this type of situation where you're talking about drag racing, where you're talking about boat racing, monster trucks, road races, there is no ideal situation. Every situation is going to be different. And the amount of fuel that gets in there can be little to a lot. So as far as fuel dilution goes, all fuels are harmful to internal combustion components. So the goal is change your oil when it's needed. Keep an eye on it. I have heard horror stories of some guys that will take their oil, drain it out of their monster truck, put it on a hot plate, cook the alcohol or the fuel or the ethanol off of it, and then reuse it. Well, some of these guys are using nitromethane. If you're not sure what that is, let's just say it's highly combustible. So setting that on some heat source is probably not the safest or best idea to do that. Will it work? Okay, I'm not going to go down that. But keep an eye on it, because any type of the fuel you're using. The nice thing about the Pin Grade 1 oil is it does keep that fluid in suspension during operation. As it sets, it will eventually evaporate out or come to the surface, if you will, and have to be dealt with that way. But I know from an oil manufacturer, you expect to hear this, but it's true. Oil, I don't care how much it costs, is still cheaper than an engine. I don't care who your engine builder is, they'll tell you the same thing. So I know it's not cheap to buy a good quality lubricant, but it's a whole lot cheaper than rebuilding an engine. So if you got fuel dilution, which you will have, then change your oil more often than you would on your passenger car. That's kind of where I'm at with that.
Yeah, no, that's good advice. All right. And kind of going along with what you were just talking about, Jim, here's a question about how often should I change my oil in my race engine? So you just mentioned a little bit about that.
Yeah, you can't answer that. The only way I would say to answer that is if you do a comprehensive oil analysis program and test that oil, then we can look at that and see if there's another race on it here. We don't get a whole lot of race drivers and performance, except when you get into certain classes, into IndyCar, Formula, places like that, where it's a little bit more high dollar operation. Those are the guys, those are the folks that are doing the oil analysis. The rest of us are kind of just looking at the oil, seeing how it feels, how many times we've gone, passes we've made, et cetera, before we do a change on that. So I can't answer that question. There is no right answer. Some people use an average. They'll tear it down, they'll look at the bearings and say, I'll reuse it. But that is a whole different ball game than your passenger car. So there is no definite answer for that. I know that's not the answer people want to hear, but that's the only answer I can give you.
And there's some indications too, Greg, that the race guys I've worked with over the years have done. One is their oil pressure. If you got brand new oil in your drag car and it's 60 pounds and, you've run a couple of weekends now, you've got 10, 12 passes on it. All of a sudden, when you start that car back up, instead of 60, it's down to 30. Well, what's going on here? Well, it's probably one of the two things. One is the oil's viscosity. You're out of spec. The viscosity is maybe sheared out. And that's an indication also. So the racer knows he's got a good handle on that because they have pretty decent maintenance like that. So they know how many weekend races, how many feature races, how many weekends they can go before they change their oil. And like Jim said, there's oil analysis, but oil pressure, looking at the oil itself, does it look dirty? Is it bad look? Does it smell? Is it a burnt smell? Some indications that can tell you, yeah, I better change my oil. It's time.
Yeah. Very good. All right, we're going to change gears here, and we just got a couple more questions, and then we will get to that Q&A portion of the webinar. So just hang with us for a couple more here. We're going to change gears and talk a little bit about motorcycle oil. Is PG1 V2 4-stroke motorcycle oil okay for my street bike, or is it more for a race application?
Nick, you want it? You want me to do it?
No, Jim is our motorcycle guru for sure.
Well, I own one, if that makes me a guru, and I do use our product, and I do use the V2 product. So I guess I got you there. But yeah, exactly. That is exactly what it's designed for. It is in our high performance line, just like all our other green oils. But yes, it does meet the JASO and the M2 Japanese Automotive Standards Organization specifications to be used in motorcycles, V2 motorcycle oils, motorcycle engines that have catalytic converter system. It is not harmful. Has a little less of the additive package than our high performance oil, but I use it in mine. I got a 2016 V-twin. I run it in that. It's perfect. I have no problem. It's a mineral based product. Our 2050 is a conventional oil. whereas our 1040 is a synthetic blend. So we do offer 2 viscosities in the motorcycle oil, and yes, it is designed for today's legacy as well as our current catalyzed engines.
Very good. All right. Now, similar question to what we were talking about on the, the car side, but does Pengrade 1 V2 4-stroke motorcycle oil contain the same high ZDDP as other Pengrade 1 engine oils?
I'm back. Hang on, I think I just got back online.
Yeah, we were just discussing whether the motorcycle oil contains the same high ZDDP as the other Pengrade 1 engine oils.
Yeah, and the answer is no. Now, the formulations are different for those engines. It does have enough in there. You can hear me okay, right?
Yes.
Okay. It does have enough in there to protect those engines. Those engines do run hotter. One of the things I will tell you is I said I use it in my engine, and it even though it doesn't have quite as much as anti-wear in there, I did a 5,000 mile summer, Indiana summer, 90-degree summer, V-twin air-cooled engine. For those of you guys out there that ridden a V2 air-cooled, you know what I'm talking about. That back cylinder gets red hot. Your inside of your right leg starts getting really warm. So I did 5,000 miles on one of those summers with an air-cooled V-twin engine, and I did an oil analysis on that oil. When it came back, the results, oxidation was at 1. We condemn at 30, if that gives you any idea how that oil holds up under those temperatures. I knew it'd be good, but I had no idea it would be that good. And that, on the 2050, it's a straight conventional non-synthetic motor oil. So look at the results of that oil on there. It's just unreal. So no,
Yeah.
the additive package is different, not near as robust as our other oil, but it's extremely adequate for today's modern motorcycles.
Yeah. Very good. And Jim, you just touched a little bit on the air-cooled engines that some of the motorcycles have. So will a synthetic blend or a conventional-based engine oil offer the protection needed for those air-cooled engines?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, they're fine. Sometimes it's a good idea if the engine's running a lot hotter, a lot longer. In other words, you've tweaked it a little bit. It's running above normal operating temperatures on a consistent level. A little extra synthetic protection never hurt anybody, and that's why we offer that in our 1040. There's a little bit there. Those motorcycles, the Japanese motorcycles, opposed to the American B twins, tend to run a little bit warmer. A lot of them now are air cooled, especially with some of the EPA laws. You're seeing a lot more motorcycles with catalysts as well as cooling systems on there other than air cooled, just to help bring that down. But yeah, synthetic brings 2 things to the table: bring you a little bit better cold flow properties at startup when most of your wear takes place, and it also gives you some oxidation stability at high temperatures. So again, I get people calling me that say, I'm running my motorcycle or whatever. Oil sometimes getting 100 and 250 degrees. I'm like, okay, our Pengrade 1 conventional will handle that. I'm not worried about it. But if you get somebody that's pushing the envelope on some of these, getting up 280, something like that, for a consistent amount of time, you might want to look at a synthetic blend product for that. And we offer those.
Yeah, very good. All right. Well, that concludes, the orchestrated portion of the webinar here with the questions we wanted to run through. And obviously, we're going to get to the Q&A portion. There's a number of questions that the viewers have asked, and we're going to get to that. But before we do, I'd like to ask everyone to please complete our survey. Obviously, we really value your guys' feedback, and we appreciate you tuning in. And as a special incentive to complete the survey, we're going to be offering a $10 Amazon gift card to 25 randomly selected people who complete today's survey. So the survey should be appearing in the middle of your screen shortly. And if you don't see it, you can launch it by going to the black toolbar that's on the left of your screen and clicking the survey icon. So while you guys do that, we will get into a bit of the Q&A session here. Let me pull that up. All right, Jim and Nick, we got a question here asking, again, going back to the winter storage topic, if they only put 100 miles on the car during summer months before storage, should they still change the oil?
Jim, yes, my opinion is yes. Let's think about that. 100 miles. That's like grandma going down to the store, picking up a loaf of bread, turning around and coming home. She really never gets that engine up to what I would call ideal operating condition, for one thing,
Correct.
to help burn off any moisture and things of that nature. And two, you still have the byproducts of contamination that are going to be sitting in that engine over the winter storage. And I know it seems like Jim stated earlier, engines are expensive. Oil is not. Yeah, you should change the oil at 100 miles and your filter, put new oil in there and have it ready to go next year. And hopefully you're able to put a couple more 100 miles on it. But to take the chance and leave that sit in that crankcase all winter long, it's not a good idea.
Yeah. All right. And then similarly, we got a question about the fuel for winter storage. What should folks look for when it comes to fuel when they're putting the car away?
I'm sorry, I don't understand what you're saying.
Just about the fuel that's there in the vehicle. Is that something that they should keep
Okay.
in the car, or take out of the car? Or
Well, we're oil manufacturers. We don't we don't deal with gasoline or fuel. Some of our distributors do that as well. So, um, I have an opinion on that, but it's not based on anything from the engine oil manufacturer standard. So I'm just going to be quiet on that.
okay. All right, we got a viewer asking a question about their Chevy 350 that has not started since 1986. What are some of the things that they would need to do to get this engine up and running? The engine has been garaged that entire time.
I'm betting he needs a battery to start off with, but I would check everything. I would, at this point, for that long, I would probably go ahead and change the oil again, just because that's a long, long time. Probably hand turn the engine over if possible, just to make sure everything moves the way it's supposed to before you start cranking on it with the starter. And then the risk of a car sitting like that are seals leaking. You see a lot of seals leak on transmissions as well as main seals on engines. The valve cover seals can dry out, oil pan gasket, stuff like that. So once it gets running, that's when I think the work and the figuring out what needs to be done is going to happen. Just sitting there, you're probably not going to tell anything until it gets good and warm, drive it a little bit, and then you're going to find where these things need attention, I'm afraid.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we got a question about someone observing that they sometimes see moisture or fluid coming out of the exhaust. What is the cause of that, and what are some ways they might be able to avoid that occurring?
Nick, you want me to do it? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, Jim, go ahead, please.
Okay. Well, you're going to have condensation in the exhaust because it's going from hot to cold, hot to cold. It's been setting. That's not uncommon to see some moisture. I mean, I've gone down the interstate behind cars, motorcycles, and see water actually dripping out of the exhaust. So it's just condensation. Once it gets good and warm, that shouldn't be a problem. As long as it's not in the oil, it's fine. I mean, it's not good on the exhaust system. Obviously, it can cause some problems with rust or some plugging of the catalyst and things like that. But yeah, moisture in the exhaust is not uncommon. That just means there's a temperature deviation that's causing condensation.
And Greg, as far as you say, maybe the smoke, well, too, just a matter of that combustion process, you're going to see those, I guess it'd be smoke come out, but that's just the process of combustion. But if it's a blue smoke or it's a darker smoke, that might be an indication that you also are burning some oil,
Yeah, good point.
A good thing to look at that, maybe a ring, valve seat's bad, a couple of rings are bad, you're actually burning your oil up, check your oil level. If you're down a couple of quarts after 1,000-mile drive, you know something's up. You know, yeah, I'm burning something. I have to do some maintenance.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we got a question just asking for some more information regarding assembly lube. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about the Penn Grade assembly lube?
I've actually got a bottle of it right back here.
There you go, a little show and tell.
So you can see it on the camera.
Yep.
One of the things you'll notice on that is the name. This is still our Penn Grade line of products, but it does have the old Brad Penn name on it. We decided to, since that was such a staple in its day, that when we're bringing this product out, that we keep that name on there for. I like tradition, so it's got that on there. I know Nick does too. That's in his backyard. So, yeah, the assembly lube. This is a it's a formulation that we've come up with that's been around. Well, it's been around for a while. That's used to coat the bearings and give you a nice clean lubricant. Comes in a nice little bottle, so you can put small amounts. It doesn't take a whole lot, just so that you don't assemble things dry. As far as the additive goes, it's just an assembly lube. It's not meant to take the place of your 40 weight or whatever it is you're putting in the engine after it's assembled. It's just to make sure things don't get together dry. The biggest complaint we have on that, it's just like anything else in our green oil, is the tenacious clingability of that stuff. They get it on their hands, they get it on the bench, they get it on the floor. They have trouble cleaning it off, which is exactly what you want. You want that stuff to stay put. When you put your Penn Grade 1 oil in there during your break-in or even after your break-in, it blends with that product. There's no reason to wash it out. It will blend with that, and then it gets changed out with your first oil change. Not a
Yeah, Greg, Jim's correct on that too. The Penn Grade 1 braking oil is missable with our braking oil. Like Jim said, it will mix. So you won't see any filter plugging or skimming, because in the old days, a lot of people used to use grease and things of that nature to assemble that engine. Well, first couple of minutes of running it, your filter's starting to plug up because it's just not good. And again, ours is missable with our braking oil, and we do not have any solids in that, such as a moly or a graphite. This is a fully mineral-based product with the right additive package to ensure that when that engine builder or whoever's putting that engine together, we're protecting those internal components. It's staying stuck to all those engine parts while you're spinning it over, putting new rings in and up and down. You're done with it. But another nice feature too is before that engine, you don't get a chance to get it run. I guarantee you take that engine or valve cover off, or you look back there a year later, that assembly lubricant will still be stuck to those engine components. It won't just drop off. And that's why engine builders like it.
Yeah, excellent. All right, well, we got a couple more questions, but I do know we're running up against the hour here. So just reminding viewers, if you do have to jump off, everything's being recorded, and you'll be able to view this at a later time or what's convenient for you. But we'll finish up here. We got a couple more questions to get to. And guys, we got a couple on viscosity. One is asking about if they double the horsepower of their stock engine, does that dictate that they move to a different viscosity?
Who asked that question? That's Joel, isn't it? That's one of our guys asking that question. He knows the answer to that. If you double the horsepower, it doesn't matter. You're going to look at the bearing clearances. You're going to look at the internal components and your oil pressure, etc., to see what viscosity you're going to use in that. So you probably will have to increase viscosity, because if you double the horsepower, first of all, that's impressive, depending on what the horsepower started off with. But yeah, right. We'll do some testing on that for you, Joel, and get you an answer. How's that, buddy?
All right, and then we had another guy ask, when should you opt for a straight viscosity oil versus a multi-viscosity? And will a straight weight hold up better in a methanol-fueled application where cylinder washdown is higher and your oil becomes diluted with fuel?
Yeah, that's a good question, Greg. When we're starting to talk between multi-viscosity and monogrades, one thing we want to remember is that a monograde engine oil will not shear. That means when you turn that car over, that engine over, and if you have a 40 weight, let's say, in there, it's going to be a 40 weight at startup, and it will be a 40 weight at operating temperature. That's going to be the viscosity of that engine oil. A multi-viscosity oil, on the other hand, two reasons. One, the additive package gives that oil the ability, let's say, when you turn it over and start up a 1040, it has the qualities of a 10 weight motor oil. It will get up to the top end faster, do the lubrication it needs, but as the temperature increases, the viscosity of that multi-viscosity oil will increase up to a 40 weight to give you that protection. So if somebody's running a car, let's say in Arizona, and his OEM's guideline says run a straight weight 40, yeah, run a straight weight 40 all the time. Because ideally, you're never going to have the sub-freezing temperatures or how cold it's going to be where you need that multi-viscosity to protect. So Jim can discuss the shear aspect, what it's doing, but a monograde engine oil will not shear.
Yeah, if we got time, we can just do it real briefly here. When you make a multi-viscosity oil, basically what you're doing is you're putting a viscosity modifier in it in the form typically of a polymer. And what happens is that polymer, as it increases in temperature, that polymer expands or thickens, if you will, and performs like the heavier grade or the top end, like a 1040, like Nick was saying, at startup, it's a 10 weight. So it's going to flow, get to where it needs to be. And as that oil pressure or oil temperature goes up, that's going to start to expand that polymer. If you use a real shear stable polymer, you'll get a lot of life out of it. But as that polymer expands and contracts over time, you shut the car off, you shut the engine down, starts to cool off a little bit. Eventually, that polymer, even the most shear stable polymer, will start to shear. When we look at oil samples, we'll see a lot of times the samples will come back with 500 hours on a piece of equipment or 10,000 miles on an automobile, and it started off as a 10 to be 30, but when we get the results back, it's a 20 weight. We expect to see that. If it's under normal operating conditions, we expect one viscosity decrease is not uncommon. Now, if it happens too soon, that means you're using an inferior product or the manufacturer's not using high quality or there's an issue with your engine or whatever that's causing that polymer to shear quicker than it should. So, but like Nick was saying, with a monograde, you don't get that. So the advantage of multi-viscosity is a wider temperature range. The disadvantage to a monograde is cold startup. That's pretty.
Yeah, excellent. All right, guys, the final question here. We got someone asking about what the ideal zinc and phosphorus content would be for a normal, street use for vintage engine that has flat tappets, such as like a 4-cylinder Willys.
Well, I'll start off with Nick. You can take over. I just wanted to say that for years, this Pin Grade 1 product was known as the flat tappet oil. There have been cam manufacturers that recommend our product. When you open the box up to take one of those cams out of their box to install, the recommended lubricant to use in there is Pin Grade 1. And the reason for that is the amount of phosphorus and zinc that's in there to help protect that and control that lobe wear. So to give you an actual number, it's going to vary on the formulation. I will tell you that ours is the perfect amount, and it's over 1,500 ppm of zinc and over 1,400 ppm of phosphorus. That CDD package is perfect for those older vintage across the board.
And Greg, to go along with that, we've had 50 plus years of working with engine builders and equipment manufacturers, and we've determined that amount of zinc and phosphorus we have in these engine oils is the perfect amount. It's like anything else. Too much of anything is not good. Not enough of something is very bad. So with 50 plus years of formulation work and working with all the OEMs, we've determined, and our product has that ideal amount of zinc and phosphorus that you'll need.
Excellent. Well, guys, tons of great info today. Really appreciate it. Again, we appreciate everyone watching, and don't forget that a recording of this webinar will be available on 3 different websites: the Engine Builder website, the Motorcycle and Power Sports News website, as well as Tomorrow's Technicians website. And tomorrow, you guys will all receive an email that contains a link to that recording. So feel free to view that again, or encourage colleagues and buddies to view it as well. Again, that concludes today's webinar. So thank you all for joining us. And Jim and Nick, thank you all for your expertise today.
Thank you,
guys.
Greg.
Thank you, Greg, very much. And thank you to all the listeners and viewers. And please feel free to send any questions to Greg's attention. And I promise you, we will get back to you with an answer.
Absolutely.
Thank you.